One of the defining moments in Lisa Su's career at AMD was the strategic gamble she took with the development and launch of the Ryzen processors. In the early 2010s, AMD was facing tough competition from Intel, and its market share in the CPU segment was declining. She recognized the need for a game-changing product to revitalize their position in the market. In 2017, AMD launched the Ryzen series of processors designed to offer high performance at competitive prices. The move was a departure from AMD's previous strategy and represented a bold challenge to Intel's dominance in the CPU market. These processors, based on the Zen architecture, garnered widespread acclaim for their impressive performance, especially in multi-core applications. This marked a significant shift in the industry landscape and positioned AMD as a serious contender in the CPU market once again. Her leadership and strategic vision played a crucial role in the success of Ryzen. The gamble paid off as processors gained traction among both consumers and enthusiasts. AMD's market share in the CPU segment started to increase, and the company saw a boost in financial performance. This success with Ryzen not only revitalized AMD's competitiveness, but also showcased Lisa Su's willingness to take calculated risks and innovate in a highly competitive industry. It also underscores her commitment to pushing technological boundaries and putting AMD back in the spotlight as a key player in the semiconductor market. So this story highlights her leadership style, her ability to make strategic decisions, and the impact of those decisions on the trajectory of AMD's success. And with that, welcome back to Leaders, a podcast dedicated to exploring the best leaders this world has ever seen. And today we look at the leadership of Lisa Su, the current CEO of Advanced Micro Devices AMD. We recently covered Jensen Huang in episode 20, also within the semiconductor and chip space, and ironically, they are both actually related, and Lisa, along with Jensen, has a similar sort of background, but has led their companies in slightly different ways, and so wanted to study the success, the background, the leadership style of Lisa Su, current CEO of AMD. And so let's trace some of her background, because I think it's important to kind of set the scene on what type of leader she is. And her background, I think, informs her expertise and approach to how she has built out AMD to succeed in the last few years. And so really her career starts in 1994. So in June, she became a member of the technical staff, first at Texas Instruments, working in their semiconductor process and device center until February 1995. So not all that long, but then that month, IBM hired her as a research staff member specializing in device physics, and she was appointed vice president of Semiconductor Research and Development Center. And then during her time at IBM, she played a critical role in developing the quote-unquote recipe to make copper connections work with semiconductor chips instead of aluminum, solving the problem of preventing copper impurities from contaminating the devices during production. She worked with various design teams on the details of the device. She explained her specialty was not in copper, but she migrated to where the problems were. The copper technology was launched in 1998, resulting in new industry standards and chips that were up to 20% faster than the conventional versions. So earlier on, you see a hyper-focus and technical expertise within the world of semiconductors. She does have a educational background as well that really hones in on this, and so she is educated through MIT, gets a bachelor's of science, master's of science, as well as a PhD in electrical engineering from there, and then goes on to these roles. And then after IBM R&D work, she then in 2000 was given the year-long assignment as the technical assistant for Lou Gerstner. Lou Gerstner, who we studied on episode 15, who was formerly IBM's CEO. And so a unique role given to Lisa there, and Lou Gerstner tells Forbes he initially worried Sue was too junior for the job, but his doubts were quickly quelled. She proved to be one of the most outstanding employees who worked in my office. Lisa doesn't follow normal patterns. She's been blowing them up her entire career. So these normal patterns, he observes, she deviates from them, and we can see that, I think, from some of the other leadership and approaches that she takes throughout her career. She then subsequently takes on the role of Director of Emerging Projects, stating that I was basically director of myself. There was no one else in the group. So as head of and founder of these emerging products divisions, she ran basically a startup company and soon hired 10 employees to focus on biochips and low power and broadband semiconductors. Their first product was a microprocessor that improved battery life in phones and other handheld devices. She was named a top innovator under 35 in 2001 by the MIT Technology Review, in part due to her work within that realm. Through that division, she represented IBM in a collaboration to create next-gen chips with Sony and Toshiba. Ken Kutaragi charged the collaboration with improving the performance of game machine processors by a factor of 1,000. And Sue's team eventually came up with the idea of a 9-processor chip, which later became the cell microprocessor used to power devices such as the Sony PlayStation 3. She continued to serve as vice president of the Semiconductor Research and Development Center at IBM, holding that until May 2007. She then gets a different position within a company called Freescale Semiconductor as CTO, heading their research and development until August 2009. From September 2008 until December 2011, she served as senior vice president. She did head up the company's networking chip business, crediting her with helping Freescale to get its house in order, and then the company filed for IPO in 2011. She then left and became appointed at AMD, so she became senior vice president and general manager at AMD, overseeing their global business units and end-to-end business execution of their products. Over the course of the next 2 years, she really played a prominent role in pushing to diversify beyond the PC market. She then was finally announced and appointed to president and CEO on October 8th, 2014, replacing Rory Reid as AMD's CEO. She stated her plan for the company involved focusing on making the right technology investments, streamlining the product line, and continuing to diversify, also asserting that she wanted to simplify the company and accelerate the development of new technology. She did have extensive experience in the other growth and product areas that they were going into, and so many thought that that was going to bode well for AMD moving forward. In 2014, when Sue, now 53, took up the CEO reins, the chip maker was floundering. So at that time when she was taking over, AMD was not doing so hot. And so the company had laid off around a quarter of its staff, and its share price hovered around $2. Patrick Moorhead, a former AMD exec, remembers it as deader than dead. Then Intel began to stumble, dragged down by manufacturing delays and Apple's decision not to use its chips in iPhones. Nimble, with the tactician's eye, Sue was able to capitalize on her rival's missteps, inking deals with laptop makers such as Lenovo and gaming giant Sony, plus Google and Amazon, whose massive data centers generated $6 billion of the chip maker's sales last year. Analysts at that time, when she was promoted into that top job, also said that the company was uninvestable with $2.2 billion in debt. Some of its prized assets were already being sold for parts. Its fabrication plant, where chips are baked, fabs in industry speak, was spun off in 2009, a blow to AMD co-founder Jerry Sanders' infamous boast that real men have fabs. It even had to sell and lease back its corporate campus in Austin, Texas in 2013. So definitely not an easy time, and we've seen some of these leaders over time take over companies that are definitely not in the best position when they first enter into CEO. So they're not walking into success necessarily. They have to do a series of actions over the course of multiple years in order to really reap the success that they are known for today. And so when she joined in 2012, joined AMD, 10% of their sales came from non-PC products. By 2015, roughly 40% of their sales came from non-PC markets such as video game consoles and embedded devices. In May 2015, she and other AMD executives presented a long-term strategy for the company to focus on developing high-performance computing and graphic technologies for 3 growth areas: gaming, data center, and immersive platforms markets. She does announce later introduction of different new line of microprocessors. She does also say within that initial story that we shared within the Ryzen microprocessors, after their launch in Q2 of 2017, their percentage of the CPU market share surged to nearly 11%. In terms of performance, that was highly regarded, high-performance computing market with those. And finally, to kind of encapsulate her career arc and experience, one of the seminal things that she has done more recently was that in February 2022, she became chair of AMD after completing a reported $49 billion acquisition of FPGA and programmable systems on chip maker Xilinx. And so we did mention episode 20, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, is related to Lisa Su. And so Su and Jensen are relatives. Su's maternal grandfather is the eldest brother of Wang's mother, basically her first cousin once removed. She did say throughout all of her career, though, that she always wanted to be a semiconductor CEO. She said, well, I guess you could say my freshman year in college, I did my first stint as an undergraduate researcher in one of the semiconductor labs at MIT. And so I was doing basically grunt work as any undergraduate would do. But I was actually making small devices, and it was amazing to me that you could actually do that. Since then, semiconductors has been my passion. And as an engineer, you always think, boy, could I make a better business decision, or is there a technology that can really change the world and change the dynamics? That's what's really been my interest in semiconductors, is how can we use the technology to do a lot of good in the world? So she's definitely bucking the trend of some of the other leaders that we've seen in terms of her background. So she's a very hard-learned technical acumen type, a PhD, MIT, graduate within electrical engineering. You see many of the executives, either that we've studied or that are currently in the CEO roles, as typical sort of Harvard MBAs, going through MBA programs, going through the company, so have you. So she is a non-traditional sort of CEO within that right of having that strong technical background, as well as a ton of different technical experience within the market that she is in. And so let's move now into more of the leadership style that Lisa exhibits. And so one thing she does value as a leader is the power of bringing people together. So she says, what you can do as a single person is great, but what you can do when you bring 10 smart people together, or 100 smart people, or 10,000 smart people together, aligned on a vision, it's incredible. She does share an anecdote of one of her first big business mistakes. Dr. Su recommended that leaders take input and insert judgment, understanding risks and managing those risks. As exciting as successes are, she says that people can grow the most by examining what could have been done better and learning from mistakes. She said it is both about empowering employees to learn on their own and guiding them along the way as a leader. She also says at AMD, she likes to use the statement, there's always the next 5% that we could do a little bit better. Always striving for better, she is. And even on her second day as CEO, she stepped up to the microphone during an all-hands call with a message for AMD's demoralized employees. Remember, at that time, 2014, it is not great. People being laid off, they're billions in debt. And so she says, I believe that we can build the best, she remembers telling her staff. You might think that was obvious, but it wasn't to the company at the time. That rallying cry was also an edict and step one in her three-pronged plan to fix AMD. And that three-pronged plan was create great products, deepen customer trust, and simplify the company. 3 things just to keep it simple, because if it's 5 or 10, it's hard. So narrowing the focus, we've seen that common. Focus really on what you're good at and really execute a few things really well versus trying to do 10, 15 things at a time or have 5 priorities at a time. She did, within the engineering realm and in this turnaround of success, she refocused her engineers on building Intel-beating chips, but it can take chip designers years to draw up a viable final blueprint. AMD's share of the server market fell even further to 0.5%, while researchers toiled in the lab. At the time, the company wasn't doing well, but holy cow, they were working on the most exciting design in the industry, she says. Engineers are motivated by products, and I like to keep that front and center. So design we've seen, engineering focus we've seen, with different successes based on the company, and certainly she is, from the technical perspective, always cognizant of what the engineers are working on, how they are perceiving things, how they're influencing products, so on and so forth. Her decision to prioritize a new chip architecture called Zen paid off when it initially launched in 2017, which I think is in reference also to the Ryzen processors. It was really good, she says, with palpable pride, adding that Zen could compute more than 50% faster than the company's previous designs. She goes on to say also, the number one thing I tell people every day is we're here to build great products, and that really emanates in the decisions that we make. How does one develop and exercise good judgment when the future is unknown and not all the facts are in? That was a question asked of her in a CES interview. And so her response to that question of developing good judgment when you really don't know what's out there in the future, you don't know all the facts. She says, yes, great question, great question. I would say that if I think about the past few months, I think this is really after the COVID era and reflecting back on that, she says, and what's on the minds of some of my peers and what we think about, the world is changing very, very quickly. The best that we can do is, number one, make sure that we have very good signals. And when I say very good signals, I mean signals about the business, signals about, frankly, the medical and health situation locally, as well as signals about our employees and our customers. We've increased that rhythm and that valuation of these signals to extend that every week. We're paying a lot of attention to the data. I think that's the best that we can do because it is an environment that's changing so quickly, and we make adjustments as necessary. So that was in the context of COVID, but obviously within the semiconductor space, that is also very relevant of a rapidly growing, innovating, changing sort of environment to deal with. She does say also, how do you adapt? How do you rapidly change as a company to whatever conditions and times you're facing? She does emphasize that innovation is encouraged in the organization, and she thinks that the way to win is to run faster. Expecting the competition is going to be strong, and then just running and executing better in the long run than the competitors, of which over time AMD has some tough challenges in regards to competition. If you think through Intel, if you think through NVIDIA now, IBM, larger, more established companies that had some runway on AMD, and she had to think differently about how to go about differentiating themselves. And so she does have some good thoughts also from that same interview about failures, mistakes along the way, and what she thinks about that. And so pivoting now into more of the failures section, we can take some quotes from those interviews. And she was asked first to say, do you learn from your mistakes or your successes? And she says, I absolutely learn from my mistakes. I absolutely remember my mistakes. It's much, much harder to remember successes because as fun as they are in the moment, they go. But boy, I remember very, very well the first really large business mistake I made, or the first you just do and those things stay with you actually. And that's what I tell people is I have this philosophy that you really learn by examining what could you have done better the next time. So this retrospective idea, we saw her mention that previously too. So she's constantly trying to reevaluate certain decisions and what she could have done better. The very first business I ran, this was many, many years ago, it was middle-sized business, couple $100 million. Within the first 3 months, I had missed my plan by 50%. 50% within 3 months. I was an engineer turned business person, and I had to learn that there's all kinds of judgment and skills in how you put together plans and execute towards plans. I remember that very, very well, I must say. I was inexperienced, and so what I had done was I had taken a lot of input without inserting judgment. Really understanding the risks involved, doing risk management, and really trying to figure out what is the outcome. What is the outcome of not every single thing had to go perfectly, but there was a way to assess what a more probable answer was. It was complete inexperience, but something that, frankly, I think for all of us, it's when you're running a large company, it's not much different. You have to take a lot of input and make some decisions about where you want to take risks and where do you want to make sure that you have very strong execution plans. Today in your position, this is a follow-up question to that same interview. The interview asks, today in your position, when you see someone making a mistake in your company, do you try to help them avoid it, or do you empower people and try to caution them but let them make the mistakes and learn from them? And she responds and says, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, our philosophy is on how do we put together business processes and milestones so that we can catch things before they happen. My goal is always to... Yes, we want to make sure that people learn along the way, but we also want to make sure that we protect a business. It's a little bit of both, and what you learn is people are really hungry and want to do the best that they can. So we have this statement within AMD that I use, and it's called the next 5%. What I say is, hey, there's always the next 5% that we could do a little bit better. And this is not about it. And this is not about was it a good result or a bad result, but you could always do a little better. So incremental improvement there. And just to wrap up things here, we do have a few thoughts on her mentors. She doesn't mention too many in interviews and different materials that I've reviewed, but she does hone in on Lou Gerstner at IBM that she was able to shadow as a young professional, and she felt that was formative year of development for her and learned a lot. She also does mention her mother as a mentor. She was her mother was an immigrant to us and an entrepreneur as well, so really admired her hard work, relationships, and her decision making. She was told by an unnamed mentor earlier in her career, too, that to run toward problems and choose to work on products that are really important. She also does believe that mentors and training programs helped her gain management and leadership skills. She says, I'm a big believer that great leaders are trained and not born. She says great leaders must shift gears from setting an aspirational 5-year vision to diving deep into the most important problem of the day. And she believes in bringing out the best in employees through setting ambitious goals, clearly communicating priorities, and providing real-time feedback. So with that is a summary of episode 26 on Lisa Su. Definitely a great leader to be studied, and certainly another one that is a current leader that continues to cement her legacy as a great CEO and leader within the business world today and for the future. And so it'll be interesting as we continue to see this space evolve within the lens of AI, as well as with the lens of compute and everything to do with our digital world today, as to how NVIDIA is in this space, as well as AMD, and how all this plays out and how her leadership can take AMD to new successes and heights. So Lisa Su, a great leader, a great technical mind that has shifted that technical acumen into great business results as a CEO and executive, something, again, pretty rare to see within her given background as we compare to others that we've studied and that we see within the business world today. And so, again, Lisa Su, episode 26, and we'll be back soon with episode 27. Thanks.